I'm Patrick Ball. You know that. I'm a former bartender and bar manager from the 80s and 90s here in Albany, New York. I started out at putting on the Ritz. It was at 8 Central Avenue. It was a very popular gay tea dance on Sundays there that I worked every week. Um, I worked at the Playhouse. I worked at Rage. I worked at Deceptions. I worked at Power Company in O-Bar. I worked at Longhorns. I was the manager of Power Company in O-Bar for a few years. Um, yeah, pretty much from 82 through the mid 90s. I loved bartending. I had a lot of fun with it. It kept me out. I'm not a go out and hang out party person, but it let me be out and among things and among people and having fun. But I was working and making money.
Well, I grew up in Cobleskill, which is about 45 minutes west of here. I grew up on a farm, so I'm a farm kid. Um, had cows, chickens, pigs, you name it, I did it. Um, I always knew I was a little different, you know. I wasn't the typical farm kid. I just always felt a little different, a little, later on, I realized what it was, that I was gay. One of my girlfriends way back when was she had um, her best friend was gay, and um, just through meeting them, they brought me out in Albany when I was 16. Obviously, was still in high school, so I would come out to Albany when my friends came. I would, take my dad's truck, drive in here, um, go to Rage, go down to Waterworks, spend the night. Um, I always look forward to those times because those were, a little country kid, coming to the city. I always call it the city, even though you say the city now, everyone thinks you're New York City. But it was a fun thing to do. Um, I got in. My friends knew the bouncer, Miss Kenny, at the bar, so he just let me right in. And
I'm actually from Delmar, which is outside of Albany, suburb. And then I moved to Albany when I was 16, so yeah.
Mark Papa I met when I was bartending at Rage, and I think he was sneaking in there underage at the time. Yeah, Mark Papa used to work me for rides home. I had a Cadillac convertible, a big Cadillac Eldorado convertible when I worked at the Ritz, and he would come to tea dance every week, and then he would like sucker me into giving him a ride home every week. Um, but yeah, he was fun. He was one of the personalities.
You just kind of like, I don't know, I just kind of made friends, and you make friends with the doorman, you make friends with the bartenders, and I was just getting along, doing my thing, and ended up working at Able, like I said, for a short time, until they found out, and then I was retired from there. But they said I could come back when I was 18.
They were a lot of fun. I mean, the bars in the 80s, they were busy all the time. Everybody knew everybody. It was like family.
Yeah, well, there was a huge sense of community back then. I mean, that was the only place you had to go to meet people and feel safe.
But I think that that's why it was so busy back then, was because that's how you met everybody. There was no social media, there was no computers, there was no cell phone, there was nothing.
Yeah, because what else was there to do? What else was there to do? You had to, if you really want to meet people, if you didn't know somebody, you had a place to go. Bars were a safe space. You could go to a bar and, maybe that's why so many alcoholics back then, because we all went to bars. You go to a bar, you go to a club, you can dance, you can be yourself. There's other people around you who are just like you.
I don't want to say like the bar culture, I became a different person. I was still myself, so I didn't have to like put a different persona on. But I could talk the way I wanted to talk. I could laugh the way I wanted to laugh. I could dance the way I wanted to dance. I didn't have to put on any, facade.
Yeah, the point of going to these things was that my life, I was a factory worker. There were no gays, as far as I knew, in the factory, and I was in an art club, but the art club was kind of middle-aged to elderly people who like to make art, and that's all great and fine. But you're not going to meet another gay soul there unless there happens to be one already.
There was not the internet. There was not the communications that we have now. So bars were much more important than they are today for meeting places, especially for people who were LGBT, and it was a necessity. It was a necessity for people to communicate with each other and be who they are.
But everybody was out having a good time, and whether it be drinking that was cultivating this atmosphere, or certainly drugs. There was people were always, poppers were always about, and perfectly legal. You would find them on the dance floor, and people would just that amyl nitrate or whatever, and you'd sniff it, and your heart would race, and all of that. I know that shrooms were, not big, but I mean, they were available then. So people were probably on every kind of drug imaginable back in the 80s.
And it was a good time. I mean, we got laid a lot, I'll tell you that much, but that's what it was back then. It was going out and meeting people, and I think we were all starved for attention, so we just, we had a lot of sex.
It was very much like that. Just you going out. Most like if you didn't have a boyfriend, you'd meet one at least for the night, and it was a party atmosphere. A lot of drugs going on, which I find out later on, but that just added to it all.
The big bar back then was Waterworks was still there. Waterworks has always been there, but was the 8 Ball, which I ended up bartending at for a period of time. And it was a little hole in the wall, and it was just, everything was black. It was just like, everything was black. Everything was painted black. But everybody went there. You'd find 400 or 300 people on a Wednesday night, It's, everybody would dance, and they had a DJ there, Keith Mann, who was really popular, and he always got the latest music from New York. And I think he was a draw for a lot of people who were into really club music and stuff like that. So that's basically, where I came out was in the 8 Ball.
But yeah, it was a car garage, and then it was 8 Balls for many years in the early 80s. And then it closed, and I don't think it was anything for a while. It was vacant. And then the guys, Tim Chase and David Goodall, that owned Rumors in Lake George, Glens Falls area, came down and partnered with a couple of other guys and turned it back into a bar again and made it Rage. Because we all saw when they were building Rage, we all saw the hole in the floor, the big rectangular hole, so the guys could go down in and work on the cars from underneath. It was still there. We just built over it.
Albany is the capital city of New York State, located on the east border. Central Avenue is the main street in the city. It's divided into Upper Central Avenue and Lower Central Ave. 8 Ball's bar was located at 369 Central Avenue between Ontario and Quail. It would later become known as Rage, one of several gay bars on the avenue in the 1980s.
Okay, so we're on Central Avenue, Upper Central Avenue, a few blocks up from Waterworks and where we just were. And if you look across the street, what we're looking at is Little Motors right now. But when I first came out when I was 16, that used to be 8 Balls, the first bar that I ever came out to. And later on, it turned into Rage a few years later. I was brought out, two of my friends Two of my good friends brought me out, and I was scared as anything because it was my first gay bar, and I didn't know what to expect.
So my name is Randy Williams. I was one of the owners at Rage when we opened in 1987. Tim Chase was the other owner who I grew up with and was best friends in Queensbury, and he owned Rumors in Glens Falls with David Goodall, his partner. And then we had Kenny White. Kenny White was also another partner at Rage. And I moved back here from Florida to go into the bar business. And I was going to be the one that would be in Albany all the time. It was very busy. In fact, Tim decided we weren't going to do any advertising. We had 5 days of open bar. So for 5 days we had open bar when we first opened. And we had everybody in the city, everybody was there. And it was packed. There was lines outside. It was insane. It was insane. You really, the bar would be packed until 4 o'clock in the morning. Thursday night was kind of like just a regular night. And then on Friday it started, and it was busy Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We had tea dance on Sundays. $6 all you could drink, well drinks domestic beer for 3 hours. And put 2 bartenders on, Tim Sullivan and Hazel. They always worked tea dance, you know, and it was crazy. It was crazy the number of people that were there. I mean, the capacity of Rage was I believe 126 people or 120 something, and I swear to God we put 200-300 people in. It was wall to wall people, and it was everybody. You know, I mean, it was packed. I never knew there were that many gay people. In the wintertime, I can remember Clarence working the door, and there'd be a line, and it would be snowing outside, and the steam would be coming out of the door because it would be so hot inside. There's like smoke coming out of the building. It looks like it's on fire.
Come here, honey. I gotta talk to you before you quit. And who's Jeff? Lot Dread. Jeff! No, that's Lot Dread. Well, it's mine now. I just bought it. Bobby's on. Who's Dread from that seems to be a line. Video or is this yes, it is. It's Barry Gordy, Mary Wilson.
Once again, whoever's entering the Miss Rage contest, be outside right now with your music.
Then, yeah, I mean, all these entertainments, you know, for 8 Balls had their follies, and that's the earliest I remember because that was very early on when I was young. I really didn't know what all this drag was all about. I mean, I knew kind of what it was, you know, but so I said I got asked. I said I'd do it. That's how I got into it. I had made friends with the bartender, and he's like, you want to do the follies with us? And that's how I got into it. And it was fun. It was just so fun. I mean, it was just the dawn of MTV, and a lot of people would base themselves on characters, you know, like Madonna or this one or that one or Taylor Dane.
We loved drag. They loved doing drag. You know, they loved. I think a lot of it too was the music back then. I think the music itself made a huge difference in. And it was a time when there was some good stuff going on. Madonna was out. You know, there was some good music in the drag itself too. I don't know. Look at Lauren. Ain't No Mountain High Enough. She did a lot of Diana Ross stuff. Jimmy, Gladys Knight, and things like that. I always loved Taylor Dane. I always did Taylor a lot, and things. They were very inspirational songs, I guess you could call it. And I think that and it really, when people did those songs, it really revved up the audience. You know, it really revved up the audience. And we just loved doing it.
Just remember what I told you the day I set you free.
I was around 2021 when it turned, at that point it was Rage. It was when I first decided to do drag for the first time. It's also when I first met Hazel, my drag mother. The first time doing drag, I was welcomed into a family which I didn't know what it would turn into. Hazel was the one who just took me under her wing, and Miss Rage was the first time I ever did drag. So I bought my first wig at Spencer's. It was a black curly wig. The first dress I bought was from Macy's, just a plain black, you know, to the knee dress, and just showed up here and entered the pageant.
Gay bars provided sanctuary from a dangerous and unjust Albany. In 1981, a gay bathhouse in Central Avenue was raided by police. 20 men were arrested on false charges such as public lewdness and deviant sex, their names published in the Times-Union. With no legal protections in the city, they were in danger of being fired from their jobs and evicted from housing. The local gay and lesbian community center stated this raid was just the latest police harassment of gays and lesbians. Patrons of 8 Balls were afraid to walk home at night. They were regularly harassed by police, searched and frisked on their way to or from the club. In 1985, a gay priest was tied to a chair in his own home on Dove Street and sexually assaulted by attackers who shouted gay slurs. When he reported it to police, they downplayed the assault and blamed other gay men. He was later evicted at gunpoint by a landlord who found out he was gay. The summer of 1988 was particularly violent. Headlines reported the murder of Archibald Boyd, a gay man bludgeoned to death in his Willard Street apartment. Police questioned the owners and patrons of Rage to find the killer. And in a 2-week time period late that summer, there were 17 muggings of gay men. Community members were afraid to come forward for fear of being outed, and that police would place the blame on them.
People got beat up going into the bars in the 80s. Yeah, you just had to be careful getting from your car to the bar, but once you were in there, you were home.
I knew people coming out of the bars that had got bugged, beat up, you know. So you still weren't safe back in the 80s. Years ago, I was walking with a friend of mine through the park, just from one side to the other. And we stopped to sit for a few minutes, and some guys came up, and I don't know what they sprayed us with, but I'm assuming it was some sort of mace or something. So it happens, and I knew somebody that got beat up coming out of the Playhouse and stuff. So it was, you know, it was a scary time.
That I played both cards if I was walking down the street and I saw somebody coming my way? Absolutely. I don't want to say butch it up because I hate that term, but you would kind of like, you know, stiffen up and be like, you know, stick your chest out.
Any gay person has to sort of steel themselves for what may come. So you just straighten up your back, you stand tall, you own yourself, and you take it on. And sometimes things are going to go great, and other times you'll get knocked to the ground. That happened to me. I had a couple of guys coming toward me on Washington, where it veers off there on Washington. And they said, "We're going to take care of this bitch." I had no idea they were talking about me. So the next thing I know, I'm on the ground, you know, and I'm just, that's it. They just knocked me down and kept walking. But, you know, I just was like, wow, what just happened? You know, but you have to continue. Your life just ends if you just say, okay, well, that's it. Then I'm never going on that street again. You know.
Well, I remember all 5 of us bartenders at Rage running for the front door because a bunch of straight guys were attacking the doorman and trying to get in. And we were all like pushing them out and trying to get the door shut, you know, 'cause they wanted to attack somebody. That was, I was at Rage from, I want to say 87 to 90, so that would be around 87, 88 that happened. Right around the same time, oh, no, earlier than that, when I was at the Ritz, which would have been around 82 and 83, a friend of mine that was on his way to tea dance at the Ritz was walking over Northern Boulevard, or Henry Johnson Boulevard, over right down here through the park and over towards the bottom of Central Avenue where the Ritz was. And when he walked around the corner into Central Avenue, a guy attacked him with a tire iron and broke his jaw and messed his face up pretty bad.
Because he was gay?
Yeah.
There were times when, yes, I did worry about getting my ass beat walking back to my car, because unfortunately with the Deceptions, there was no parking, so you had to find a spot on, you know, the street, and sometimes you were a few blocks away, and, you know, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, Albany is kind of a scary place, especially back then. So there were times, you know, because you would go from having this great time to like leaving, and you had to make sure that, you know, I never left the bar without more than 2 people because you didn't know. And then you'd make sure that that person got in their car, and then we would literally drive each other to each other's cars, so we didn't have to walk. So
in Washington Park, where, you know, people would go to have a little nookie behind a bush somewhere, people started getting beaten up. A couple of my friends got beat up just from being in the park. So you would just walk in down the street normal, you would get called faggot, or, you know, it wasn't fun, you know. But that's probably what made me have that hard skin where, you know, call me anything you want, I don't care, because I'm better than that, you know.
1982, there were whispers in newspapers and among researchers of a new disease that was affecting gay men. Some labeled it a gay precancer syndrome or a gay-related immunodeficiency syndrome. Death rates from the disease were high, and there were no treatments that worked or cures. This disease would become known as AIDS, caused by the HIV virus. At the same time, tele-evangelists and politicians use this epidemic as fuel for their hate-filled rhetoric against the gay community.
I'm sick and tired of hearing about all of the radicals and the perverts and the liberals and the leftists and the communists coming out of the closet. It's time for God's people to come out of the closets, out of the churches, and change America.
I agree with capital punishment, and I believe that homosexuality is one of those that could be coupled with murder and other sins.
Give your sex life to God. Let him be the law. And keep it within the boundaries of marriage, as God meant it to be.
There is not one case of AIDS on record in this country, or as far as I know anywhere else, that did not have its origin in sodomy.
Americans try to raise their children to understand right and wrong, only to be told that every so-called lifestyle alternative is morally equivalent. That is wrong.
Reverend Falwell, ladies and gentlemen, it's a real pleasure to be with so many who firmly believe that the answers to the world's problems can be found in the Word of God.
I think that was the most political thing back then in the 80s, was what little the government was doing, because it was such a gay disease. They thought, you know, it's God sending down the wrath on homosexuals. And that's what my brother-in-law told me, even before I started coming out. So I already had all this kind of notion about AIDS. And
you know, Reagan just walked around like it didn't exist. He killed millions of people. I mean,
Can you talk about?
Yeah, well, I mean, the social situation politically was the end of the 70s. You know, was like gay was chic, la 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 la, and then of course this gay disease came out. This gay cancer, they didn't know what to call it. And then you have these evangelists who are becoming popular at the time telling you, oh, it's God's retribution for being gay, and this, that, the other thing, and fire and brimstone, and which is a crock of you-know-what. And, and Reagan wrote, just ignoring the whole situation, like, you know, there's no federal funding for you, or you don't need it, you know. Just, it was freaky because it was just like, you knew these people didn't care about you, wouldn't care if you died, you know, and it was just so freaky, especially being young, that people could be so hateful, and they really can.
Injustice occurred on a local level as well. In 1987, 6th Ward Alderwoman Nancy Burton first proposed gay rights legislation that would add sexual orientation to Albany's anti-discrimination ordinance. Mayor Whalen, at that time, said, "My feeling is that Albany as a community is not ready for this." Bishop Howard Hubbard of the Roman Catholic Diocese stated, should this legislation be passed, it would place society's stamp of approval on homosexual behavior. In 1988, when the bill came up for a vote, it was overwhelmingly shot down 12-2. In a debate at the 1998 City Council meeting that voted down gay rights legislation, 10th Ward Alderman Thomas Birch stated, "We, the general public, will pay for your lifestyle with the plague you have brought upon us."
And no protections, no legal protections for people. So a lot of people had jobs they were worried about, they could be fired from. There was still a great deal of stigma from people with HIV. A lot of people were uneducated about how they could contract it, so they were worried about, you know, having neighbors or teachers or doctors or any kind of associates that were gay because they thought they could get AIDS from just associating with them. I had a doctor who refused to have me as a patient just because I was gay, because of that fear, a doctor.
This is like one of the hardest things to talk about because, like I said, you know, I started dealing with AIDS and HIV back in the 80s when my uncle had it back in 83. You know, they gave him they said, "Hey, is your insurance paid up? Is this paid up?" And he was like, "Yeah, don't tell anybody anything because, you know, you're not gonna live 6 months." And he didn't. You know, and to see people not wanting, you know, this is a relative of mine, to see family members not wanting to feed him, I'm like, how can y'all not do this right here? That's like inhumane. And they're like, oh, you're in high school, you don't understand. I'm like, I understand food. I understand feeding somebody. You know, if you're hungry, you feed somebody. But in the bar scene, it was like, it decimated. The bar scene seemed, it looked like it was going to die out totally at one point because no one wanted to go to a bar or club or bathhouse or anything else because they were afraid they were going to catch something and die.
But during the time at Rage is when AIDS really started hitting, and I started noticing certain people disappear. I just didn't hear anything about them. I didn't know. And it was a while before I started hearing. That's when we started hearing snippets about AIDS, about a gay cancer. And then it was like a year or two after that, we started realizing that we were losing these people to AIDS, that our clientele was disappearing. And that was just, and then it started in the obituaries, because I read the paper every day, and people I knew started showing up in the obituaries, people in their 20s. And it was just heartbreaking. So many good, nice, fun people that had bright futures, just taken out by that. Just hundreds of them.
Hundreds around here?
Yes. Over the course of years, yes. It was just...
So there were a lot of, that's when the benefits started. And people would, the drag queens, not only had entertainment, but had a purpose to do what they were doing. And I remember it was very hard because there were no government programs to help with rent for people who used to work, could no longer work, had this strange cancer, which they called it, and because they didn't know anything about it. And so, you know, that's where you got the Brothers Keepers and people, you know, Meals on Wheels and all that charitable stuff was basically started through the gay community.
And our Brother's Keeper and the drag queens. All of a sudden, the drag queens were on my radar. You know, I never had seen a drag queen number of years coming out. They weren't around in the early 80s that I could see, and then all of a sudden, like by the mid 80s, they were all over the place. Everybody was doing everything they could to raise money for the AIDS unit, which was at the Albany Med local hospital here, and the C4 unit. And so everybody was, the queens would do shows, and these organizations would come up and do huge benefits, you know, and everything was to just help out these victims with AIDS that the government wasn't just listening to. But the community itself, the entire Albany community, just kind of rallied around this cause.
Which is why I think our community was so tight. I think our community was so tight because we had to be. We were all dealing with all of those emotions and everything else, and I think it fostered a certain amount of camaraderie, I guess you could do, you know, and we had to keep fighting. We had to stay positive. I will say that the lesbian community, they were a big force behind us because those are the ones that were really fighting. I think a lot of times we were fighting also too. We certainly were, but they also too, they just they supported us very, very much. I think they were very involved, and they, I think, had maybe a more stronger emotional constitution than maybe some of us did. I don't know. I don't know what the reason is, but they were a really big force behind us and fighting for HIV funding, for marriage equality, for, you know, all the healthcare things and things that we needed, and for all of our rights. I think that they were, you know, a big inspiration to us.
In 1990, Mark Papa helped open a brand new club called Private Eyes that was located further down from Rage at 112 Central Ave. It was on the corner of Lexington and Central Ave. It became one of the most popular clubs for the gay and drag community.
Well, my role in Private Eyes was, I was there from the inception of it. In fact, I think the naming of it was my idea. Danny and Keith Mann were friends with the person who was opening the bar, and they were both managers. And it's kind of funny, I think Keith Mann wanted another person named Mark, who he had worked with at 8 Ball. And Danny Bellani, who was a great DJ as well, wanted me. So, I mean, I was there, you know, when it was being, you know, the bar was being constructed, what color the carpet's gonna be, this, that, the other thing, you know. So from the very, like, beginning of Private Eyes, I was a part of it. And yeah, it made me, Private Eyes made me legend. So I can never say anything bad about Private Eyes. Because I knew it would, I knew it could, I knew what I wanted out of it, and I got it.
Mark Papa, Lauren Michaels was one that I looked up to. She was one of the big, like, mega queens back then. And we became really good friends. As I stated to you earlier, we lived together on Dana Ave, right across from Washington Park for a while. It was like I was adopted into a family. And it was a family that didn't judge you, you know, just took you for who you were and looked out for you. It was a family atmosphere. You know, I had my sisters and stuff, my gay sisters, that we always were doing something. So we used to do a lot of shows, a lot of benefits.
But Lauren was, you know, the star, you know, and everybody knew her, and you know, she had won all the titles, and they promoted and used her as, you know, the draw for the bar, and she did. She could bring them in, you know, whenever she was going to do a show. She did the opening, she did the closing, she did the MC, and she was really, really good on the mic and things like that. And you know, it was packed. It was packed. I mean, Private Eyes was packed. You know, we used to get on New Year's, we used to get the 24-hour liquor license, and oh my God, it was crazy. The real power behind Mark was Ross Nadler. Ross was the idea guy. Ross he figured out the choreography, he figured out the staging, he figured out the costumes, he figured out all that stuff for Lauren. He was her right-hand man, I guess you could call it. He just passed away a few years ago now. But, you know, that's, Lauren had the right people behind her, and he was it. He was the one that really, you know, really knew how to stage her, knew how to put her to her best advantage.
That Valentine's Day Follies, I met my best friend in life, Ross Nadler, and we became fast friends. And I was doing, you know, he actually was so creative. He was like a dressmaker. He could make clothes, which was amazing. And as far as like anything I wore, he had a hand in it in some way or another. And we basically planned my career. It was thought out. And at first I was like, you know, okay, what's the crown? You know, where's the crown? Who's having a, you know, thing? And you know, that's how you would get notoriety.
If I can bore you for a minute, I'd like to read this. And Mark, wherever you are in this bar, I hope you're listening.
I love you!
I love you too, baby. But without his energy, his support, his pure talent, I wouldn't have anything to motivate me at all. To quote someone, he's someone without whom nothing would seem possible, and with whom everything seems worth a try. Thank you, Mark, for the last 50 shows. Thank you for the inspiration, and may the next 50 be wonderful.
Keep your fantasies alive. I'll always love you and they'll be true. You think I can live it up? I'm not the dream that you had before. I'm the dream that I give you more and more. Your dreamers was we got me. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Your dreamers was always had. Will your dreamers?
Tonight, Emma's Private Eyes, as you well know, the first prize is a trip to the Caribbean. Ooh. We will also give prizes away for Miss Congeniality, and a first runner-up prize will also be given away.
Yeah, that was like everybody, like when I talk to people from that I've known for very long periods of time, which is rare because I've been in different eras, they always talk about Private Eyes as like the great capstone to end the bridge between the 80s and the 90s and the great last hurrah. I mean, that was like sort of like the last great big party before AOL. You know what I mean? And I get that a lot. They were like, that was like the last like great place, and you know, run like a New York City club would be run, type thing. And I say thank you, and I think, yes, it was. Things don't just end; they kind of fade.
You know, as the bars changed names and that kind of stuff, whole new families were created in those bars. So, you know, the whole, like a whole new set of drag queens would even come up.
After Private Eyes closed around 1994, Longhorns opened up a couple of buildings away.
Longhorns was, interestingly, the leather cowboy bar, but it was also the drag bar. And that was the only place there were drag shows. So, you know, you if you wanted to see a drag show, you had to go to Longhorns because the other bars didn't have them. So, yeah, so, you know, that was kind of interesting too. There were some drag events at the Power Company. There probably were some at Waterworks too at some time or other, but the regular performances were at Longhorns.
This was Longhorns in my day, where I started my drag career, basically. I met a lot of people here. Phil and Tommy, the owners of the bar. Hazel, many sisters. I own a trailer. So many different people. Hillary, Iodine, the list goes on and on.
Hazel, she was an empress. She was just the dowager queen of all, you know, she was just like pure royalty. Sherry Love was like number 2 under the empress, you know. Did she run Albany? Partially, yeah, she ran Albany because somebody had to run Albany. Somebody had to put all the shows together. It was her. Somebody had to step up that mantle. She did.
I mean, Hazel and Sherry and like Chi and Iodine, we like looked up to them because there was a sense of like, not power, but like royalty. And I know it's drag queen, but you know, they're just, you know, and they carry themselves with grace. I mean, and people respected them. Like even like regular like bar patrons, they would be respected.
Hazel, for example, would come up and do a song and get hundreds of dollars, hundreds. You would have the entire audience, everyone in the place would tip her, and she would get not just singles, but bigger bills, and it would take the entire number. And after the song was done, people were still in line waiting to tip her. Hazel earned her place as the drag queen royalty. However she did it. Maybe it was because she was at every venue. Maybe it was because of her wit. She was a presence. I think that as a drag queen, you cannot be a wallflower. You must be someone who makes a statement.
Gave a lot of start to girls here. Amanda Love, Chi Chi Ray Colby, Carmi Hope, Frida Munchon, Kevin. The list goes on. And it was a gay place to be back in the early 90s.
When the mob came and got her and dragged her from the jail, madam, they strung her up from the willow across the way. And the moment before she died, she lifted up her lovely hand and cried, madam,
Stars MC was a leather/motorcycle club that was out of the central region here. Stood for Schenectady, Troy, Albany, Rensselaer, Saratoga, and those like all the little surrounding areas in this area, which they encompass people coming in to meeting for it was part of it was fellowship, part of it was fundraising because they would raise funds, and part of it was just to have a sleazy good time.
Well, like I said, a lot of the Leather Club members were also drag queens. Myself, Hazel, Alexis Samani, Hillary, Iona Trailer. There was a whole list of people that were part of the Leather Club that were also drag queens. Not all. Some guys were just normal guys that just liked to wear leather. But they were very intertwined, and like I said, we planned a lot of different events, benefits, and they were always there to help.
Stars MC, when I came into it, was like the premier leather club of New York State, and probably one of the premier leather clubs of the country for a small group. They were bringing a lot of money every month. They could make $1,000 a month, a couple thousand a month, which was unheard of for most leather clubs back in the 90s, where they may have a cash intake of maybe $50 to $100, here we are with $1,000. And they weren't afraid to use the money for charity, but they also weren't afraid to use and say, hey, let's run a bus trip somewhere, and it's gonna cost the members next to nothing because they put in so much time and energy working. At the time period, I didn't realize how the leather community and the drag community meshed here in Albany. Outside in other cities, other states, they don't do as well. Where I've had leather people say, oh, we don't like drag queens, blah, 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 blah. But here they're like, we welcome everybody. And that's the greatest thing about Albany. They welcome you in and say, okay, you're into something, you're into this. That's not who we are, but come on in anyway. We welcome you and come on in.
Well, they were very welcoming to anybody. It wasn't like if you didn't have leather, you weren't part of the club, we shunned you at all. That wasn't our vibe. The vibe was, be one, teach one. So if anybody had any interest, you'd always want to try to share what it was.
just like drag queens have their sisterhood. I mean, it was like a brotherhood. When you put on leather gear, it makes you feel different. It makes you feel like empowered, or it just makes you feel different, like sexy in a way, and or more manly, or whatever that feeling that you get from it, which is kind of similar to drag in a way, because once you put on all the accoutrement and you do your makeup and you put your body on and put your tits in and then you put your wig on, you become somebody else. It's kind of like the same way in leather. When you put the chaps on, or you put your harness on, with your leather cap, and you put your armbands on and your boots, you feel different.
Ross Nadler was talking about having a leather competition called Mr. Empire State Leather. And I looked at him, and I had never done drag in Albany or anything else. I was always a comedy queen, and I said to him, I said, listen, you do the whole leather competition. You get this stuff off the ground. I'll do a drag performance for you. And he's like, bet. And I didn't think anything of it until like months later. He goes, okay, when are you performing? Because here you go. I've got it together. Here's the dates and everything. I was like, oh. But true to my word, I performed at the first Mr. Empire State Leather as a drag queen. And I did the show, very nervous, because I was like, oh my God, I'm performing in the leather community. What they're going to say. And everybody had a great time. I had a great time. And that was one of the reasons I thought, this is the place I want to be, because I can explore all parts of myself and be accepted for who I am.
Basically, what a leather contest is, it's like a male beauty pageant, but for guys in leather. And there would be different categories. There would be jockstrap. There would be fantasy, where you'd have to act out a fantasy on stage. I think you like those. There was like formal leather, and then you had to do like a speech, kind of introduce yourself and just tell about yourself. And that was all judged, and a winner was picked every year.
I mean, they did benefits, they raised money, they just did so much to give back. And it wouldn't be just the Albany people, it'd be people literally coming in from other states that were throwing money, like, oh, you guys are doing a benefit, okay, what do you need? This is like, it was just amazing. It was almost, I don't want to say magical because that's corny, but it literally was. The energy was just like bursting. And again, people wanted to have fun, but they also, their hearts were in the right place. And if something happened to somebody in their community, they would rally around them, and they would just like, do whatever that person needed, or whatever, whatever they needed. If a new cause came out, the leather people were the first to step up.
In those days, all the shows were about raising money for what they call the Guy Wind Fund, which was Get You What You Need. This is for people who were being hospitalized or who couldn't work, and they were laid up with HIV, and they didn't have resources. So the Get You What You Need Fund was to get those people what they needed.
At the core of the matter was always fundraising and raising money for their Get You What You Need Fund. They called that the Guy Win Fund, and they would make sure that they help people who couldn't help themselves, and raising money that way they could get somebody. If they're in Albany Med, they would say, a person might ask, they say, oh, I wish I could have a telephone in here, I wish I could have a TV in here. Those are things that Medicaid, Medicare, whatever else doesn't provide. But their Stars MC Fund would provide that stuff like that, those incidentals that government funds would say no to, we would say yes to.
And Dana did a lot of numbers for the Stars guys. The leather clubs always had a guest performer, and it seemed like that a lot of times, especially the Albany ones, they used Dana for that. And Jimmy would sometimes be Dana's drag roadie, or sometimes he would do different contests or things with Dana.
But at every leather event, my great friend, Dana Matthews, was always like the entertainer and kind of like MC of the pageant as well. She was one who taught me how to do drag and showed me how to do drag years and years ago. But she would always be the entertainer. And then usually after that leather, it's kind of like a leather pageant, leather contest, we would do a big benefit at the end of the weekend and just do a big drag out benefit, usually over in Washington Ave in the park, and end the weekend on a big high.
Anyway, I do this number at all, most of you know this, I do this number at all my shows, a benefit number, to raise money for whatever local AIDS organization in the town that I'm working in at that time. Tonight the money's going to the Helping Hands Fund from Hillside Campground. You all familiar with that? I kind of had to say where I wanted tonight to go because last year at this time, I was 30 pounds lighter. I loved it. Anyway, I wasn't doing real well. By the end of the summer, I ended up in the hospital and had used up all my sick time, and the Helping Hands Fund helped me out while I was in the hospital. So then I realized exactly why I was doing this number at all my shows, because I was quite impressed when they sent me a little bit of money to help me out. So I really want this money to go back to them so they can help somebody else who needs it in the future.
Alexis Amani was a great friend of mine too. He was part of the Leather Club. He owned the leather store in town for many years.
Owning a leather store was nothing in my wheelhouse. Nothing I ever thought, oh yes, this is something I want to do. No. I would go there because it's next door to Longhorns, and sometimes you have needs for stuff. The old days, like, okay, I need poppers, I need a cock ring. There was a local porn star who ran the shop. His name was Ken Savage, and he was like in Drummer magazine, like leather magazine, like all the top echelon leather magazine. He posed naked in, did films and things like that, and he ran it. And the one day, just out of whim, he's like, "Are you working?" I'm like, "No." He says, "I need to run and go do something. Can you work the shop for me one day?" I was like, "Yeah, I can do that." He says, "Okay." Locked up for him. He says, if you come back, if you're not working, come back the next day. Can you work for me again? I said, "Yeah, I can do this." And then one day he says, if you're not working a full-time job, I'll offer you a full-time job to work. And I was like, I'm bored with my current job. Okay, I'll do it. After a while, he got tired of it. He says, hey, why don't you buy the shop for me? Buy it from me. And I said, I don't know if I can afford this. He was like, well, make payments. I said, you know what? As long as I can cover the payments and like a little extra, okay, I'm in. This is Central Avenue right here, the old Longhorns, which is now the Joint Hookah Lounge. This was the site Longhorns, where many different things happened. But right here, this parking lot was 88 Central Avenue, otherwise known as Savage Gifts and Leather. A lot of things happened right here. This is the shop I used to own. I bought it from Ken Savage, and then I had a business partner who I took over and purchased it from her. We were grandfathered into this location here, according to the city of Albany. We were not allowed to leave because the items we sold, not to mention, we had some dirt on a politician or two that let us stay here when they closed down all the other little businesses around that sold illegal things such as poppers. So they made a special dispensation saying we can stay here in Albany County, but we had to move out. If we ever moved for this business from this location, we could not be in Albany whatsoever. We had to move further down outside. So we stayed here as long as we could. Many people have gotten their leather education in this defunct leather shop now parking lot, where they learned not only what a harness was used for and the things that we could do with some of the equipment. Of course, I had a full selection of playroom supplies here. Not to mention, I had upstairs. We owned the building at the time period. Well, my business partner owned the building. So we could have people go upstairs for private parties after the shop was closed, where I did have a selection of toys they could use. Our biggest customers were the police and fire department. They had some of the most kinky fetishes you ever want to see. But if they had some strange fetishy porn they want to get, we knew exactly where we could buy it or who would make it for us to sell to them. I know that sounds like I'm just a horrible person right now at this point, but that was the business side of things right there, the dirty little secrets of the underworld of Savage Gifts and Leather, where we would do things like that, just trying to make sure that the people stayed happy. And, you know, if the fire chief or whoever else was there needed that little extra boost, you know, we make sure to give it to them and ensure that they were happy, which kept them happy, which they allowed us to stay, and they kept them out of our backs. There are many times we could have been raided, but we never were. On a few times they were going to raid us, we knew in advance, and they said, okay, get your stuff out, but please bring us this video that we want right here. I'm like, okay. And that's how business works sometimes. That is the underbelly, the seedy side of the business. But boy, let me tell you, a lot of fun was had here.
When Longhorns closed at the end of the 1990s, Sherry Love, the owners Phil and Tommy, and Stars MC moved up to 348 Central Ave to an old VFW hall and named it Club Phoenix.
But then after Longhorns closed, it was the same owner, Phil and Tommy, that owned Longhorns, opened up Club Phoenix. And then that became Stars Home Bar, because Phil was also, I think Phil was a founding member of Stars. We did a lot of renovations to that place before it opened. We sat down with Phil and we just kind of dreamed it up, and he kind of gave us carte blanche of like, what do you want to do? He's like, you're the queens. So this was the entrance to the main bar downstairs. It goes right downstairs into the bar downstairs. We used to do, I actually was a bartender here for a few months. We used to do a lot of tournaments. There was pool tournaments, dart league every Wednesday. So a lot of stuff happened here. It was like a home bar. It went from Longhorns moved up the street to Club Phoenix.
All of the like Stars MC, they moved their nights to Club Phoenix. So you would go to the leather nights, and I mean, you couldn't move. I mean, it was literally people from different states, different cities. I mean, it was just mobbed, and you literally couldn't move, and it was amazing.
The scene here was so good that at Club Phoenix, people don't never realize, they never tell anybody this, but the heterosexual leather clubs would come to Club Phoenix and have their events there at Club Phoenix because we made it a welcome, safe space for them. And if you can welcome heterosexual leather people to a gay bar, we're doing pretty good as a community. We can say, you know what? Yeah, we're going to welcome you in too. If you want to come in, you come hang with us too. That's something you don't find everywhere. No.
When Tommy and Phil bought this, they had a lot of flooding or something happened on the main floor, on the bottom floor. So they had to do a lot of renovation, rip up the floor. And once that was done, then they moved up to the dance floor. And that has its own entrance here. And on Saturday nights, this was how you would get into the main dance floor. And it's all open with a bar along the side. But then for the shows, you go up one more floor to the show bar. All right, so Club Phoenix, so you can see a better view of it now. On the top floor was our show bar. Brings back a lot of memories too. Mogma. Yeah, when they closed that theater, they just threw out all the curtains, and Phil found them in the dumpsters, and they were perfectly fine. We cut them up. We didn't need as much as obviously they did, but so we cut them up and I sewed them. I brought my sewing machine to the bar and just sat up there and sewed fringe on all the curtains, just certain parts on the top, and then had them hanging down. It was fun. It was fun to be part of it, because once you're part of something that you took pride to do, like we actually built the stage on the floor, the dimensions and all the scrap wood we signed and threw it under the stage. So if you ripped up the stage, you'd find our names there. But on the top floor, I used to pack that place. I had a following, Hazel had a following, and whatever we did, whether it be a pageant or a benefit show to raise money, people would come out in droves, and we would pack the place.
People would come out, and people would actually I don't want to say they would dress up, but they would treat it with like going to a Broadway show, because the level of talent that was there was amazing, and people knew that they were going to get an amazing show. They weren't going to see a bunch of drunk queens stumbling over themselves.
Yeah, it was crazy, but it's so important again because they were all benefits in those days. They were still, from after Longhorns, early years of Club Phoenix, all the events were still benefits, and it was so important. Those places were packed, so that's our support system. Those huge audiences were all for it, and in a city, Albany's not that big. That's a big percentage of your population coming to all those shows regularly, contributing and being a part of it.
I don't really know. I guess just the amount of members that were still part of the club, kind of dwindled by people just moving away or just not wanting to be part of it anymore. So I couldn't tell you the exact reason why it did. But that happened to a lot of leather clubs around in the area.
It was popular for a while, and it struggled. It was a big place. It was a huge place. But he had a tough time. It started off okay, but he had a tough time keeping it packed. He had a tough time keeping it full. We did okay. We did okay for a while. But he just struggled to really keep it was just too big of a bar. It was just too big of a bar, and the overhead on it was just too much. And Albany couldn't support another bar. I just don't think it could. And the other thing that worked against Phoenix was it was uptown. Everything else was down pretty much in Lark Street or, Waterworks and right across the street from one another.
I'm not really sure when it closed. Back then, it was probably after I retired, per se. At one point, I just said, I think I've done what I needed to do. And I retired, sold everything. Actually, I held the sale on the top floor and sold every piece of drag that I ever had. And then now I come back once or twice a year and still do like Pride or any kind of benefits that they have around.
HIV/AIDS, it really changed the communities around a little bit, not even a little bit, a lot, But that made us a little bit more resilient as a community because we knew that for the most part, no one else was going to take our community, so we had to do it ourselves. And that was the greatest thing about the leather community, the drag community, and the rest of the gay community in general, because we can't perform without the gay community coming in and supporting us. And there are some heterosexuals who come in as well, but mostly it was our gay community got together and said, "Hey, we're going to take care of our own." And so, that's the greatest thing. That's the greatest triumph we have is the fact that when the chips were down, we took care of our own more than anything else.
You who know me know I love DJing, but let me tell you, it is definitely an honor to be here when these girls perform. And now, as a special favor to me, I'd like everyone who is sitting, everyone who is standing, to please come forward, join hands with the girls and yourselves in this number. Because that's what it's all about. We are family.